30% of what you heard,
Yeah.
and you go home empty-handed going, well, that was interesting. Now what do I do? Don't do
Because
that.
the biggest hurdle I think a lot of people go through is that they're away from their family for a weekend. That's a journey for people, right? Including us with younger kids. And you're probably gonna spend about $1,000. So
Mhm.
the collection of the two is really nerve-wracking for beginners. But I'm gonna tell you from our personal experience, I've never been to a conference where I felt guilty when I went home going, man, I shouldn't have went.
Yeah.
Because it's
Absolutely.
always beneficial. It's
Yeah.
always worth that $1,000, if not more.
Yeah. And as you're sitting there listening to all the other presenters, take a note and go, I got to meet that person for this. I got to meet that
Yep.
person for that, and really push yourself to do that. Because
Yep.
I know some people go to these things and they're intimidated. Well, I'm brand new, and nobody cares.
Nobody
No,
cares.
nobody cares.
You go up and say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing.
Yep.
I'm brand new. I like what you said about this. Can you tell me more? Do you have a business card? And
Approachable.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
Fantastic. So we're always curious about with our different guests, and you've got a lot of experience going back. So I'm curious because you said you're not expecting a big crash. So we're looking for Kevin's crystal ball. What do you see coming down the pipe here the next 12, 24 months?
Yeah, I
What should
don't
we
see
look out
a
for?
big surge of non-performing loans. Yes, we're going to have, the office market, everybody knows, right? I mean, that the
Yeah.
writing's on the wall for that, and that's what's collapsing first. The commercial side, but traditionally, we don't see too many commercial loans. The bigger players have a tendency to absorb those. So if someone's looking like, well, I'm waiting for this office, but you're going to be waiting a long time. They're not coming. The bigger players are going to be involved in that, but it is going to merge into a banking crisis. So there's probably going to be a merger of some other banks. But again, these banks are under a lot of pressure with the Dodd-Frank laws to really try to do loan resolutions. So I know there's been some people that said, hey, keep your powder dry, keep your money on the sidelines, wait for these big loans. Mistake. Put your money to work. And if the market's telling you right now there's good prices, good deals, low risk, good reward on performing notes, put it there for now, because you know what? We have a liquid market, right? So
Yep.
if I was talking with somebody the other day and he's like, I don't know if I have investors who want to put, their money locked away for 20 years. I'm like, they're not locked away for 20
No.
years.
No.
They could buy a note now and sell it in 6 months if they wanted to or needed
yes,
to.
it's very liquid.
Yeah, we have a liquid marketplace, which
Yep.
is a fairly new reality
It's
in our
true.
business. So I don't see that coming. I see eventually there'll be a trickle of those. And I think that, these emerging notes will be a small part of that. Again, I'm
Yep.
not saying build a business just around that, where you're going to focus on that, but keep your eyes open for those opportunities. But I think we're in a way for just a long performing session right now. PaperStack did their numbers for year end, and I think their little study of activity on their site is reflective of the overall industry, where it's 90-10. I was surprised. I thought we were 80-20, maybe 70-30, 70% performing, 30% non-performing. PaperStack came out 90-10, and I have a tendency to believe it's closer in the overall industry to. You guys were not at the non-performing conference in Orlando, right? The IMN?
No, I didn't go there. I know
So I
Nathan
was there.
went to the one in California.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was there, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And
Yeah.
a lot of people on the non-performing side, inventory.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think you will find some non-performing loans, but a lot of them are overpriced right now.
Yes.
And, the other thing I would say is, you got to stick with your numbers. If you start bending some of these rules and getting too aggressive and overpaying for these non-performing loans, again, you're going to find out at some point in time that you overpaid.
I think people get jealous of other ones who said, oh, post social media, I bought 4 loans or I bought 5. And it's like, well, did they buy a smart? Did they buy a good price? Or did they buy a bad price? And now you're chase them and it's, well, I got to buy something. And sometimes it's just, sometimes don't buy, right? We go back to 2006 and 2007 and go, if you went back to yourself looking over your shoulder, would you told yourself to buy properties or hold your cash? And being real careful. And I think we're in that kind of market where, don't be fooled by someone buying something that you think that they bought well, because they may not have. We don't know.
Right. And it is a delicate balance, because I have seen investors and of course, if they're clients of mine, I'm like, I got to reset your expectations, because they start to look at notes and go, well, I'm not buying anything unless I can make a 15% return. I'm like, well, good luck. You're going to be waiting a while.
Yeah,
You're going to be waiting on the sidelines. And in the meantime, you can put that money to work right now at 10, at 11, at 12, and have a good, safe, solid note you have to don't do anything with. But you want to sit on the sidelines and put a line in the sand saying, I'm waiting for 15%. Don't make that mistake. So have expectations.
It's so true.
But make them within what the reality is in the industry, because I promise you the note industry is not going to adjust to you. You got to kind of adjust to
You make a great point, though, because I think what we don't realize, 4, 5, 6 years ago, 10 to 12 was a good number, right? It was a good return when rates were at 3%, and now rates went up, so we have to go to 15. It's like, well, do you think you're going to hold this note for a year? If you hold it for 5 years, so rates go back down, you're back in a place where 10 to 12 is good. So I agree with you. We got to look at the long-term thing and stay with the numbers, be conservative, but be smart on the fact that don't snapshot and say, well, 15% today. Well, what happened at 11% 4 years ago? Why is it no longer good and solid? So
Well, I had a guy, this is a couple of years ago, but he wasn't a client of mine, and he was really happy about this one note. He goes, yeah, I bought this note. I'm making 14%. And I said, oh, well, good for you. What'd you do? And he goes, well, I'm going to round the numbers for everybody, but it's a $100,000 house. The guy put $5,000 down and got a $95,000 note, but he wrote it at 14%. So I bought the note for about $93,000. I'm going to make 15%. I'm like, who cares if it goes to default? That's if the guy pays. If it goes to default, congratulations, you just paid $93,000 for a $100,000 house. Now you got to put your foreclosure cost. You've lost money. So you're right. And the other thing is, you don't want to force yourself into a deal for the sake of getting a deal. Look, I've been trading a long time. I know this industry inside and out, and I'll have clients. I've got plenty of clients I've gotten in a deal in the first 30 days because I'm working with them one-on-one on Zoom, going through everything. And, I tell them, your goal is 30 days. Great. I said, we're going to work towards that. But if we don't find something that is right,
don't be desperate.
Get you into a deal that doesn't make sense for you. And again, every one of you have different risk tolerance, you have different reward expectations, different amount of time and effort you're going to put into this. So you really have to focus on that first, and then see what's available within the industry that fits you. But don't just get so aggressive where you pull the trigger. Now, I agree. Part of, as good as I feel I am and know I am in educating people, part of this education is you do have to do a deal. You can't teach, you guys teach on this too. You can't teach everything. Nobody can teach everything about this business. You just have to be, it's different when we show case studies. You do this, you do that, but we
it's fun.
Check for $30,000. But also it's like, did I do the right thing? Or what
you said before hit a point. We run into too many people at these conferences who are saying, I'm buying performing notes, and their calculators is a financial calculator. And say, well, that works until it it defaults. So I'm not saying the financial calculator is bad. I'm saying it's limited, and people need to realize that just because you bought a performing note, unless you get a guarantee from that seller that it'll perform for 30 years, which you will never get, you need to know the fact that
even if you do, it's not worth anything.
That's true. You need to know the fact that it's going to default or could default. And if you sit there and you bought it at a percentage of UPB, which is another scam out there, right? And you bought it at a 14 yield and it defaults, like the $93,000 deal, that's a bad situation to be in, because you didn't understand the risks of a note buyer. And then you sit there and we go, well, we'll buy it at 72. And you go, whoa, that's really cheap. You're buying it at 22% yield. Well, there's a risk problem here too. Sometimes we can buy it at a 12 yield and it makes sense for both sides. Sometimes you can't.
It's never one number. It's a combination of numbers. And you know what else it is? I mentioned to you when I first graduated college, I became a commercial real estate appraiser. And the first thing they tell you about appraising, which is assessing the value of real estate in that case. But what do? We assess value of notes. They tell you as an appraiser, this is an art, not a science. There's no magic formula that tells you what a house is worth, because at the end of the day, it's what a willing buyer and willing seller in an arm's length transaction is willing to buy and sell it for. That's what it is. And what you're trying to work on is the probabilities of that. And part of that is, yes, we can find out what other similar homes are selling per square foot, and we can make adjustments and everything else. But a part of that is your interpretation of what that is. And it works the same way in notes. Essentially, when we're
Yes.
doing our due diligence on a note, we're coming up with an assessment of value, an appraisal of that note.
Yeah.
And by secondary, we're looking at our collateral and coming up with what's the value of that. We're not going to be exact, but are we in a good ballpark where we
Right.
could absorb adjustments? And that's really a part.
So let me throw out one more possibility. If people are looking for a 10, 12% yield and they're just not finding it, another option, settle for 8%, totally passive, and give it to
Yeah.
somebody, like me, that's got a fund
Right.
that's willing to do the work for you and just pay you.
Sure.
And for most people, that is such a much easier task, right? You don't worry about stuff. You don't concern yourself with the issues or problems of being a note investor. Buying a note is the first step of many owning a note, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with a borrower, the emotions, the struggles, the finances. You may have to come up with 15 grand to get a tax bill paid up. Like there's a lot of other extras that go into here that just get lost. So if you are someone that says, I don't want that risk, look into a fund like Nathan's and say, listen, I can settle and be happy with this opportunity. And you can learn as you go too. I'm going to tell you, you're probably not going to want to, but you can learn as you go. And I think that works for a lot of people who are retired and just looking for some, passive income.
Yeah. And it is funny when you start to see a lot of yield hunters, in this business, and there's 8%. 8%'s a good return. Where else can you get an 8? An 8% return, that there's assets that are backing it, today. Even, banks, it's crazy. The inflation and all that stuff is up, and banks should be paying higher on savings accounts, but good Lord, look at CD rates and stuff.
Oh my God.
It's like, what are you doing?
It is amazing when you see a CD that's 6 months higher than the one that's 3 years. I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen a CD where a 2-year CD is lower than a 6-month. It's just reverse, the whole reverse. But so Kevin, this Friday afternoon has been awesome, man. I almost feel like we're not even on camera, just chatting in circles.
Hanging out.
I
don't
know
how long we were going. It feels like
it's been
keep
good.
Going, it's fun. This is good.
Yeah, so I know Patrick made a comment over there, so it's cool to see Patrick on here and his sharing. Kevin, I know that we'll be seeing you soon at upcoming conferences and whatnot. If you want to get a hold of Kevin, we share his information in the chat. If you have any additional questions, reach out to him. Kevin, thank you so much for your Friday afternoon and spending some time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a pleasure, man. It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Good. Thanks so much.